Good evening to one and all. I am Advocate Anand Kumar and I am going to be your host as well as the moderator for today's webinar. My team APLC and I welcome you all to this 10th and special webinar of the series titled Court Crafts, the Art and Science of It by our special speaker, Senior Advocate Mohit Mathurji, President, Delhi High Court Bar Association. First things first, we thank the participants for your continuous support. Based on your participation and patronage, we can undoubtedly say the law of diminishing marginal utility does not apply for our webinars. As always, we keep this request from our end to all the participants. Kindly mute your audios and if possible, disable videos from your end too. The session is completely moderated one. Once the presentation of our special speaker gets over, APLC's APLC and question answer segments would follow. If you have any questions to ask our special speaker, you can leave them in the chat box, and if time permits, all your questions will be answered by our speaker. With each passing webinar, we are trying our level best to improve and elevate one step further. Intense research, coordination, man management, data analytics, etc. goes before organizing and hosting these webinars. We are evolving too. We have been watching the recordings of our previous footages again and again and do the error correction. We try to give something more in the new webinars. We come up with new segments, renowned special speakers, and interesting topics too. We want to give our participants nothing but the best. We owe the entire credit of this webinar to our special speaker, Mohit Ji. After all, we are just setting up a stage for the special speaker to connect with the participants and vice versa. As a formal introduction about the organizers for this event, we are Team AP Legal Chambers, a new age law firm in Delhi NCR with a branch office in Chennai. Things started falling in place in 2017 and we had committed ourselves of providing plenary services to our clients and trying to resolve their legal issues to the best of our abilities. APLC has been providing specialized services in the area of domestic and international taxation, constitutional laws, IPR, commercial advisory, arbitration, and corporate compliances. We started organizing these webinars out of our passion for law, and due to the extremely positive response from the participants, we are organizing the webinars bi-weekly. As always, once the speaker's presentation gets over, we shall be having this segment called APLC's APLC, Ask the Popular Learned Counsel. We have prepared a few questions from our end and would be asking them to our speaker. I am sure it will be both interesting and informative. In today's webinar, we shall be covering the all-important topic of court crafts, how to harness them, and how you can develop the skills. We shall get to understand the art and the science of court crafts, the nuances of court crafts that shall lift you from an ordinary to an extraordinary lawyer. One cannot learn swimming through distance education course. One needs to get inside the water. Similarly, one cannot become an expert by reading the court crafts from the textbooks. One need to have on-the-job training, watch how the seniors and prominent advocates take control of the situation and then they react. Without an iota of doubt, we can say the court craft is the most potent weapon in an advocate's armory. There are so many ways to learn the crafts. One is learning from the masters, and we have one such master before us. Sri Mohit Mathurji is a senior advocate based in New Delhi. He is a third generation lawyer. His father, Sri Dinesh Chand Mathur, is a leading criminal lawyer of Delhi, while his grandfather, the late Sri Tara Chand Mathur, was a legendary lawyer of his era. Mr. Mathur, after attaining his LLB from the Faculty of Law in 1991, joined the chambers of late Sri G. Ramaswamy, the then Attorney General of India. Since then, for 3 decades, he has been proficiently handling cases in various fields before the Honorable Supreme Court of India as well as various high courts. He has been regularly handling criminal cases both at the level of trial as well as at the appellate and revision stages. He has dealt extensively with cases under special statutes such as the Prevention of Corruption Act, Food Safety Act, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, etc. He has been associated with the prominent cases in the past, such as the Bofors case, former PM and JM MPs bribery cases, Jain Dairy Hawala cases, Personal Point triple murder case, coal block allocation corruption trials, and appeals, besides several other important cases. He has been involved in several cases that have led to captivating developments in the law. For example, the evidentiary value of sniffer dogs in investigation or the application of law of limitation to special statutes. He has served as the honorary secretary of the Delhi High Court Bar Association from 2011 to 2014. He was designated as the senior advocate by the Honorable High Court of Delhi in 2015. He was elected as the president of the Delhi High Court Bar Association in 2019. When I approached him for the webinar, without any hesitation, he graciously consented to be the special speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our Mohit Mathurji. Without delaying any further, I welcome our special speaker to APLC's webinar. I am so excited to listen to his speech. Welcome on board and over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. I don't know how to thank you because the topic that you had selected and asked me to speak on is something which of late has neither been addressed nor does it interest people. So I was myself a little surprised when somebody amongst the youngsters thought of it. And to tell you honestly, I consented only because of the topic. Otherwise, there has been a deluge of these webinars in this lockdown period, and perhaps this overdose was weighing in my mind as well. So I thought that perhaps this would be a pleasant change. It gives me actually great pleasure because this issue is something which is very dear to my heart personally. As a student of law, I feel that litigation is totally based on the courtcraft of the counsels. And it's the courtcraft sometimes which sails you through, besides the merits and the law, which may be in your favor. Today's lecture one could call a Courtcraft 101, being the basics of the elementary court etiquettes and strategies, which I wanted to just share with everyone. Everyone's experience is different. I am not giving any kind of a nuclear science here, but only trying to discuss with you some things which I would call that if you want to have the flair of the litigation, if you want to have the flair of arguments in the court, then you must also adapt yourselves and adopt certain nuances of your courtcraft, which will take you through for a longer distance. You can be the most brilliant counsel, but if you are not able to articulate your point and hammer it through, then it is futile. And you would be, in fact, wasting your talent and at the risk and peril of your litigant client. As counsels, I believe courts are a stage where we are performing as the actors in different fields, and you are adopting a different role each time you go before a court, because each court is different. That's why courtcraft is generally called the art of advocacy. It's an art because everyone is performing there. And that performance is weighed by the judge with your merits. And sometimes he gets swayed by it. And you tend to benefit. It could go other ways also. Otherwise, if you are trying to antagonize and you want to just say, I am the only one, then perhaps it might go on a different tangent altogether. And as I was saying, no two courts require the same set of skills. And counsels, the art is in adapting yourself to the stage on which you are put. Each day is a different enactment. Each day you are a different actor. So your performance has to be after factoring in the court where you are, the matter how it is, and then what all is in your armory. So the human factor, which is omnipresent, is there not just in our lives, our litigants' life, but also the courts. So we have to keep adjusting on a daily basis. And sometimes not just daily basis, even in your, while the matter is on, you have to change tracks. You have to change tones. You have to change the tenor of the way you are speaking. So all those things keep weighing on a daily time, on a moment to moment basis. So you have to somehow adjust, and that's where the art of advocacy and courtcraft is. See, keep in mind, we have chosen a profession which requires certain professional ethics, and these ethics also require us to sacrifice certain things, because this is a noble profession. So we owe to ourselves and to the people of this country that our exercise is in the pursuit of truth and harmonious development of the law. So you can make your money along the way, but just for the money, don't try to mislead the court. That's one very, very important aspect of courtcraft. That it is not that at every cost I have to do something. It can be modulated in a manner in which you maintain your ethics, you maintain the decorum, you have to maintain your professional duties, and then you have to approach the cases and the issue in hand. I have to, as Anand just said, I have been as an office bearer of the Bar Association. So in that journey, there are certain things which do happen, and you experience them as you have to sometimes represent your own members of the bar. You have to sometimes work for their causes in the court, and that's where you have to master the art and the science of courtcraft when you want to push their causes as well. And anyone would know that as an office bearer, many times you are just pushed in the front to handle a situation. There are so many misunderstandings that would happen if in case you are not adequately equipped with the courtcraft. Because many times we as counsels in our exuberance, we feel we can do no wrong. And even if we have done wrong, we must be granted the indulgences. That's why I said we have to keep all these four things in mind: our duties, our ethics, the approach that we have, and the decorum that we have to maintain in the court. See, when we wear these black and whites, we need to build a collective conscience as well. And in that, there are certain do's and don'ts that may take us up a very difficult path as well. So while maintaining the camaraderie, we as counsels have to sometimes also tread on those lines when counsels, in their over exuberance, sometimes annoy the court, and the courts then want to pull them up. In those kind of scenarios, you would find most lawyers rush to the office bearers to rescue them. And that's where our court craft is also tested. One has to be very, very careful in your language and your expression. I don't say that simpliciter because you are very good in your expressions and in your language doesn't mean that you will be good in the delivery of the same. We have inherited a good and a wonderful system. So without fail, it's also our duty to maintain it. And it's our constant responsibility that we, with our court craft, maintain the dignity of the system, at the same time get the relief which our clients intend us to do. It's that struggle and perseverance which goes on. But we have to keep maintaining our, what I would call, the values have to be upheld, where this profession remains a noble profession. And it's not for nothing that this profession used to be called noble. The noblemen once were the leaders. And over the years, though this profession has been opened to all, but still there is that dignity which goes along with it. And I loosely sometimes say that we must remember and keep in mind, outside on the street, everybody calls us Vakil Sahab. Nobody calls, oh Vakil. It's Vakil Sahab. The respect that goes along with the black coat has to be maintained, and that's our duty, and that's the craft that you must imbibe in your mannerisms, in your working, in your ethics, which takes you through to a longer distance. I remember long back when I was only a couple of years in the profession. And as Anand mentioned, I was working at that time under the tutelage of Mr. G. Ramaswamy, who was known for his wits. And he could take anyone and any court, he could take them out of a very, very serious argument into a laughter. And that craft, he always used to say that this lightening of the mood, when you lighten the mood of the court, many a times your transgressions are excused. And not just your transgressions are excused, the court sometimes feels that in the cases of discretionary reliefs, those minor discretions where they are required, those light-hearted moments just carry them together and they just carry it in your favor. I distinctly remember Mr. Ramaswamy was the Attorney General, and after his tenure was over and he had set himself for the private practice, one of the courts was very, very vocal about the fact that, oh, so Mr. Ramaswamy, now we don't have to say Mr. Attorney General. Obviously, it may have hurt his ego or whatever, but he quipped back so politely and in such a humor that the court started laughing, and probably he did not utter a next word. He got the notice and stay. He simply said, yes, my lords, now I have attained a position where nobody can take it away from me, and I am going to remain in this position forever till my death. He said, what? He said, now I am former Attorney General, which nobody can take away from me. I will always remain so. The bench started laughing and they just simply said, notice, stay. And said, okay, Mr. Ramaswamy, we'll see you after 2 weeks. So that's courtcraft. You know the judge wants to get at you. You realize it and you humorously just take it away. Push it aside without aggression. So first thing is you must know what's the decorum you got to maintain. You don't need to be aggressive all the time. So on this, I would say your calmness and composure is something which you must weigh all the time. And personally, I feel that a shouting match with the judge doesn't help anyone whatsoever. Whosoever it may be, shouting matches are a big no. Every time, it's not that you have to prove a point by giving it back. The courtcraft is to realize what stage you are in, what's the kind of drama you have to act, and factor in all that the judge is also trying to say, and sometimes what the other side might say or might not say. Keep in mind, since I was told by Anand that most of the people attending today are the younger members of the bar, my advice to you is, please, you must control the content of your argument. Don't drag it. Because you must know what the judge wants. He wants his time not to be wasted. That's the first thing. He does not want to be antagonized. And he wants to know what exactly you have come for and what exactly are you wanting to say. So if your arguments are concise, but factually cover everything, then you can very conveniently take your case through, because you've got to be aware of your facts. You have to marshal your facts. And I am saying if possible, because many a times it is not possible to enumerate your points, but if you can understand from your contents and cull out the major highlights of your case, and you start by saying, rather than giving a larger number, my lord, my case, there are 3 major points which I want to say. The judge, you will find, will intently start listening to you, because it's a human behavior when he is tried in a manner, if you portray something which is very focused, something which is very easy to enumerate, something which is very easy to recall, the courts look up to you and start taking down notes as if they are being given very, very short things to mull over and decide. If you say, my lords, I have 15 points, he's going to say, give me a written submissions so that I'll cover it up later and see in the judgment that I will cover. But if you tell him, my lord, there are only 3 major points that I want you to listen, he'll pick up the pen immediately. That's the human reaction. That's psychology. And that's the science one has to factor in, that these are elements which you need to keep in mind. And this thing, take it from me, that you can ignore whatever I'm saying, but you will find any good senior when you are watching them. Because watching them, Anand rightly said, you start learning the do's and don'ts. What are they doing so correctly that they are being listened to? See, hearing is different, listening is different. Please understand the difference. Hearing, the judge hears. Listening requires his attention. So to draw his attention, learn from the seniors. Don't underestimate their wisdom. Ultimately, they have reached that level with some talent. You don't reach heights without merit. Got to have some merit. You may be having some lucky breaks. Yeah, all of us do, and I am no stranger to it. I've had my chances where certain matters and certain appearances have turned the tide as far as I was concerned. And I'll give you those experiences. I'll share those experiences. Maybe down the line, somewhere in your life, you just might have the benefit of it and know what should not be done or what should be done. Either way. So watch these seniors rather than when you have extra time, rather than spending your time in the cafeteria, which we also did. But still, if you have spare time, standing outside in the corridor may not help you so much. Just go inside if some good senior is arguing in one of the courts. And you'll find there is a way that they deliver the argument. Their diction, their delivery, all matters. And it's very important because you will then find how they concise their point. In very few words, they make their point. It's like the highlight is given and in those bulleted points, and then they elaborate it. So in the elaboration, even if you miss out something, it would not matter so much or affect your case so badly if your highlighted point is bold enough and clear enough. So if you make your 3 points, 4 points, the judge will note them down. Minor hiccups here or there can always be corrected, either in the arguments or rejoinders or whatever. Also pay attention to the volume, the tempo, the controlled aggression. And why I say controlled aggression is because you will not find any good counsel without a little bit of aggression. They've got to be aggressive to that limit which their own style permits, as well as what actually the judge requires. So don't take it to heart or build your egos when the judge says something. You've got to be very, very cautious in your approach. Aggression, it's like a music thing. The crescendos and the tempos, you have to keep on going up and down in your long arguments, but in your short arguments, must marshal your facts. Don't miss out anything. And this is what you learn from watching seniors, how they are able to package it. That packaging is the craft. Also, you must know and keep in mind the mannerisms. Your facial expression many a times gives the judge an indication of the confidence that you have. Keep in mind one thing, the conviction of your arguments is also reflected on your facial expressions. And many judges read your facial expression to realize whether you are really pushing the point and is the point really worth looking into or not. So your facial expressions Your mannerisms in court should not be frivolous. One, they should not be demeaning to the other side. Don't act condescending manner. The judge might take it otherwise, because that is one thing which even the audience in the court, I would say, those sitting behind you, also watch. And that's what builds your reputation as a counsel. People start believing you more. And in those minor discretionary reliefs, you get the benefit once your facial expressions are of confidence, your delivery is proper, without wasting the time of the court, you come to the point, you have marshaled the facts and the law, you bring it forth to the judge appropriately. At the same time, you are respectful of the place where you're standing, which includes your own side, the opposite side, as well as the court. Because of its position, you will always respect the court. But keep in mind, it's a two-way traffic. The judge will respect you if he finds you and your arguments, your mannerisms worthy of respect. He will give you those indulgences once he's satisfied, and take it. It's like those discount schemes that you buy something up to such and such amount. For your next purchase, you will get a 25% off. So it's this argument and the craft that you are employing today is like that discount coupon you are going to get for your next argument. So you will get that benefit, not maybe in this case, but definitely in the next case. Impressions become long-lasting and very significant in minds of people, where the people, you have to repeat, you have to go again. After all, we are one profession, which is where our theater, we visit every day, and with a different drama every time. So the next time when you perform, that indulgence, that discount coupon is given to you. And I can personally vouch for it. Reason being, I lost the case while developing the argument on sniffer dog evidence, which Anand also mentioned. But the Honorable Supreme Court judges, Justice Sethi and Justice Thomas, if I mistake not, were the ones who heard me at length on the appeal, though they dismissed my appeal of that murder appeal, laying down the law in my favor as far as sniffer dog evidence is concerned. But after about even 2-3 weeks I had gone there, they smiled and granted me the relief of anticipatory bail, because on the earlier occasion, though they were dismissing it, in the end, and I was a very young counsel, perhaps your ages, they asked me, "Young man, where do you practice?" I said, "Delhi." Said, "The way you have prepared this appeal, we don't see counsels in the Supreme Court making notes in this manner. Can you hand us the notes?" It was Supreme Court, but I was reluctant because my writing is more like a doctor's writing, which only perhaps a chemist can read. So barring my clerk, nobody else could read it. But since it was the Supreme Court, I just passed on the notes to the court. They looked, they talked to each other, and they said, "Good." Handed them back to me. But at the end of the arguments, the order was bad. It was a dismissal. I went home with a heavy heart, only to realize 3 weeks later that the arguments of that day helped me get an anticipatory bail from Supreme Court on the next occasion. So please keep it in mind. Your performance is not going to be judged or not going to be given the result necessarily on the same day, but it could help you in long run. So you are in this profession for long. So don't think of short-term benefits alone. That's why I wanted to share all these experiences, because they help you. Sometimes you get disheartened that I tried my best, but look, the judges, to say impolitely, were not able to understand. One could use harsher words when we are in the corridors, but on this forum, I would only say that they could not understand. But later on, you realize the effect your arguments of the day had on them on the next day. Something which we sometimes forget, just like any drama or theater, the opening lines matter. How you open up your case, it's like the best foot forward. You got to have your strongest batsman opening the innings. You can't have tail enders opening your innings. So your best foot forward, you got to give to the court a perspective in your opening argument. Obviously, it depends on what kind of a case it is and what kind of an argument. Is it a final argument? It's a miscellaneous case, admission stage, intervention applications, miscellaneous application. Keeping those things in mind and factoring all those things, please keep your opening argument a proper way, a proper argument which should be concise and precise. It's something which we don't generally do in India, but in trials in US, you have opening arguments, which gives a broad overview, a bird's eye view of the case to the jury, to the judge, to the audience. It's like a trailer. So the trailer should be able to excite the judge and basically titillate his interest in your case. So be very careful what you say in your opening arguments. Don't simply start by saying always, my case is squarely covered by such and such. Yes, you may do that when you know that the judge also wants to run away from your thing and give you the same relief, identical order, all right. But otherwise, if you are before a new bench, new court, totally new thing, don't start with these remarks, because sometimes the judge feels, what the hell, you're not telling me what your case is, just trying to say squarely covered by that judgment or this judgment. That doesn't help. Before you enter the court, as I have been time and again saying, marshal your facts. Many a times it's always necessary to even have your, with today's system, maybe your PDF cases when you are on your virtual computer, virtual court hearings, then your, otherwise generally the courts are also very annoyed and irritated if your paging with the court does not match. So you should be on the same page in this. When I'm saying same page, means the same wavelength with the judge, that what you are trying to say, he should be able to pick it up very easily based on, and he's able to follow you when you are speaking from the page and you tell the judge the page and he has the same page. He's also on the same thing and he follows you along with it. You should know what are the previous orders so that the judge is also satisfied that you know the background. Unless it's a first appearance, obviously it's a different situation. When I was mentioning about the maintaining your volume and temper in the court, I am actually reminded of a couple of anecdotes which are ideal example of what to do and what not to do. One of the things is some judges in the past in the High Court have been very nasty to those people who speak very loudly or argue very loudly. I happen to be one. And I faced the music as well. The particular judge had the tendency, the minute I would raise my voice, he would say that I am transferring the case. So I realized that with this judge, there is just no point in trying to be aggressive. So for the next 7-8 years that the learned judge adorned the bench of the High Court and I continued to appear before him, I maintained a volume of probably just around the point of being mum. I would act as if that's the normal pitch. And keeping that pitch low, I continued appearing before him. And on his retirement, I told him, and in fact the audience as well, that I was even scared of keeping the speakers in the High Court canteen close to the seat where he was sitting, lest he would say that, Mr. Mathur, keep your volume low, I am not deaf. That was a standard remark. So you've got to know the peculiarities sometimes, and one could call it to the extent of idiosyncrasies. But if it harms my client, what's the point? And that's the art of advocacy. You know it, and yet you want to take the risk. Then obviously it's at your peril and at the peril of your client. So sometimes these peculiarities also you judge by attending that court a few matters earlier than yours. And this, you would find many lawyers who travel out of their hometowns and practice. They attend for say 20 minutes, half an hour before the hearing is scheduled or their own matter is likely to come, just to watch how the court reacts to things. So you must maintain that as one of your weapons in your armories. And your courtcraft is something which, as I said, is so much dependent on how you are also presenting your case. And the other anecdote which I am reminded is of one judge who retired from the High Court. When he was the sessions judge in Kadkaduma Court, I happened to appear before him for an anticipatory bail for father-in-law and mother-in-law in a 406-498A case. I had just said one sentence that, my lords, the applicants belong to Bangalore. This is a matrimonial dispute between our son and the daughter-in-law. And before I could say another sentence, the complainant's counsel and the lady jumped in. And jumping in, they started leveling all sorts of allegations, left, right, and center, without even waiting for the judge to say anything. The judge wanted to keep them quiet. They did not listen to him. They just went on and on and on and on. After 15 minutes or so, even the prosecutor stepped aside and allowed them to speak. When they had had their fill, the judge looked at me, and before I could say anything, he said 10,000, both of them with one local surety. I smiled. The lady again started, and the complainant's counsel said, "My lord, there is nothing in the matter." There. He simply said, "When you could not stop here before me, I am sure you would have made life hell for them at home." So these are things which happen. So you must know when to stop. So one has to hold your horses. You got to know that you are pushing it beyond limits, beyond the tolerance limits of the judge. So that's the court craft. One thing which I am always telling all my junior colleagues and all members of the bar, law students also, is maintaining professional ethics, both inside the court and outside the court. With the bench, with your fellow counsels, with juniors, with staff, and all employees of the institution. That's a part of your demeanor. That's a part of your court craft. If your behavior with them is good, decent, respectful, then you get the same respect in court for minor transgressions. So you've got to maintain your decorum and ethics both inside and outside. That's the beauty of this profession. The honor as a professional, I would say, has to be maintained by the members in their conduct in all spheres and every sphere. And that's the difference between we as the intelligentsia of the society and any other professional. Our conscience has to be alive to the proprietaries and improprieties. We as lawyers have to maintain that the judicial system, we are an integral part of it. We are one of those important wheels on which this chariot runs. So if we do not respect it, we do not maintain the dignity, no outsider is going to respect us. And confidence of businesses, their aspirations, based on unqualified trust and confidence that they report. The aspirations that they have from us is from the way in which we perform. See, courtesy breeds courtesy, courtesy begets courtesy. So you've got to be courteous in your arguments. Crafty doesn't mean that you've got to be sly. Crafty doesn't mean that you've got to be concealing things. Only to get the end result, you don't need to go off track from your ethics, from your good conduct and a professional conduct. That's the difference between profession or any business. You're not here to make profits. You're here to make your living, but as a professional. So as a member of and an office bearer of the Bar Association, I implore all of you and want all of you to understand that when we address our arguments in court, the arguments should with them carry that courtesy, that decorum, that dignity that the judge who is on the other side listening to you. And I am again consciously using the word listening to you, not hearing you. because hearing thereafter shifts to the next level of listening, where his attention is drawn to your arguments. When he is listening to you, he respects you as a counsel, and not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry who has come to his court to make submissions. That's the difference between just any counsel and a good counsel. Your courtesies, your decorum, your language, your expression, your knowing the facts, your marshalling everything and telling them in a concise, precise manner, that's what begets your respect. Also, courtcraft is necessary sometimes when you have to do some kind of a troubleshooting. There is a very old saying which I was reminded, and not just reminded, perhaps made to recite every time, was your arguments should also keep in mind that many a times you have to live to fight another day, and sometimes you have to fight to live another day. I never understood the nuances of the two till I entered this profession, and I was told the first involves courteously sneaking away from the arguments, circumventing the whole issue of confrontation. Maybe the next day will be another good day. And the second involved, keep at loggerheads, keep on fighting, act like a bull, so that you tire the other person out and you live for the other day. So both these tricks also need to be adopted many a times, and that's also a part of your craft. So don't always think that craftiness has some kind of a negativity attached to it. Craftiness is also the manner in which you portray, the flair with which you project your case, and the art with which you are able to get what you want. And at the same time, neither do you compromise your position, nor do you compromise the dignity of your profession. You will hear everyone advising you presence of mind is a must, which I'll also repeat. Yes, you've got to have presence of mind. Yes, you've got to be quick on your feet in your answering the court's queries. And that's, I think, a very common thing, and you must have been advised on it every time by your law college teachers, by your peer, by your immediate seniors, as well as your seniors with whomsoever you had your trainings. But also have a plan B ready, and that's also a part of your craft. You must have a plan B when you find things are not going right. You must have a plan B when you find that you are pitted with a situation where neither the things are going right, nor do they seem that you can do it the same day. You may not be able to get it right the same day. So keep your plan B ready always. Many a times I've seen, and this is something which I learned very early in my career. And that's an anecdote of a very, very senior person. He is unfortunately no more amongst us today. Mr. V.P. Raman, who was a former Additional Solicitor General of India, and I had a chance to only see him once. He argued for about 15 minutes in the Supreme Court. 2-3 points he raised. The judge was not agreeing with him. In the end, just before parting, he said something as a point. And my lord, this also was there. He said, Mr. Raman, why did you not say this in the first stage? This is a very strong point. They consulted each other, the two judges, and said, you should notice that you should have said this at the first. He said, and that's the craft. I want to tell you the element. He very politely said, my lords, I was trying the smaller points first. Maybe my lords would agree with me. I had this point in the end because I knew on this point my lords will agree with me in any case. But maybe the other points also interested my lords. And he politely turned around and went out. Frankly, the other side didn't know what hit them. And we were sitting in the second and the third row. We were asking each other, who was this counsel? He didn't have the court with him for 15 minutes. And suddenly he portrays as if we all along knew what to do. So these are things which we have learned, that you must know what's that point which will hit the court the best. And don't be terse to the court, but remember, even the court needs to reciprocate courteousness, and the judicial decorum requires that the court respects the counsel. So build a fora for yourself, because each one has to build a niche for himself. And I don't want to be appearing gender biased, herself or himself. So you've got to build your niche. And that's where, when you have put yourself as a counsel, your mannerisms, your behavior, everything is judged, not just for the day, but for all future moments to come. And don't think your life as a counsel is ending with one matter. That one matter is just one of the balls being bowled. Life as a counsel is like a test match. The duration is long. So build your innings properly. It's not a T20 that the team sitting in the dugout is waiting for you to only hit. And unless and until you hit boundaries, nobody is going to applaud. Sorry. This is a test match where you've not got to lose. So you have to stick your ground. You have to dig in, keep batting. Don't be a bore, but keep light-hearted moments in your argument. Keep your arguments concise and precise. Be courteous. Modulate your voice so as to give the correct impact. The requisite impact must go. And once you are through with all these things, you will find you would have built your craft and honed the skill of advocacy to such levels that the benefits will keep on pouring in. And you will never be facing any kind of contempts, which is one threat which always looms large when you are too aggressive in your as an argument, in your arguments to, as a counsel, and the judges want to dangle that sword on your head, that will have you hauled up for contempt if you continue. As a senior member of the bar and as a president of the High Court Bar, my request is, while you are honing your skills as an advocate, while you are learning the basics and the advanced stages of courtcraft, have the responsibility to maintain quality in your arguments maintain your ethics as a counsel. Don't mislead. Don't say falsities even for short-term gains, because they are then taken against you once you are exposed on it. And please remember, this is a profession where reference matters. Your name and your reputation travels faster than what you can. Your image travels wider than you can think. So do not go in for short-term bargains. You might end up with, if I may say, some sasta product of your image, or as we in today's time find and accuse, Chinese maal ban ke reh jaoge as an argument, and you will not be able to build yourself as a strong lawyer. Thank you, and I hope I have not taken too much of your time and exceeded the time limits Anand had set me. So thank you very much. If there is anything I can help in or answer, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. It was enlightening, and you have given the insights as to how one can develop his or her code crafts. Just I would like to, with your permission, I would just like to quickly summarize for the benefit of our participants. You have covered subjects like important subjects and touched upon aspects like not misleading the court, maintaining the decorum and the highest standard in the court. We should be always prepared to push for others' causes as well. We should be careful with our language and expression. Wit is important. It makes the moment lighter. No need to be aggressive all the time. You need to have a controlled aggression. Hearing is different, listening is different. Watch from the seniors to find out how they package it. Mannerism and facial expression plays an important role to impress the court. Whatever you do in the courtroom for the first time is an investment, and the return on investment would come to you by default. Opening arguments should be concise and precise. It should be started with a bang, and we should always put our best foot forward. Always marshal your facts. There is no second opinion about that. Know when to start and when to stop. Behave with all the people in a dignified manner. Be courteous and maintain your ethics both inside as well as outside the courtroom. Court crafts is necessary when you need to do any kind of troubleshooting. The best one for the day, which I feel, is live to fight another day. Fight to live another day. So have plan B ready when things are not going right. Sometimes keep the best for the last, because court practice is not a T20 match, it is a test match. Build your innings, always go for it, stage by stage. Court crafts will come to your rescue. Thank you very much, sir. It was really wonderful. You have taken your time and you have given a wonderful presentation, sir. With your permission, shall we just move to the next segment, which is called as APLC, sir?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. We have just prepared a set of questions, and I would like to ask you the first one. Sir, in physical hearing, there are so many aspects involved, like how you discussed, like body language, gestures, mannerisms, dramatics, etc. But if you look at the virtual court proceedings through video conferencing, usually most of these points are nullified. In fact, the plus or minus of the crowd is being exactly nullified. How to modify or adapt to the VC hearings, considering the video conferencing is here to stay, at least for a considerable part of this year?
Anand, I'm in fact thankful that you asked me this question. I had thought of incorporating it in my lecture today, but my heart did not want this non-physical hearing to go on for a very long time. So that is something which I wanted people, rather they will adapt themselves if they know the other nuances correctly. See, one may say gesticulations, your confidence on your facial expression, and the audience may not be there. But see, your concise and preciseness in your arguments, the contents of your arguments need to be conveyed, whether it is virtual, physical, anything. And to tell you honestly, I have been able to, in one of the hearings, because the problem of technology, neither one thing is I am technologically challenged. So it's very difficult for me to do it. And over and above that, if the government agencies don't give us the internet bandwidth properly, then we are not able to even argue properly. In one of the hearings, and since it's a pending matter, I will not say about the matter, I lost the video. And I had to insist to the court that I am switching devices, and I went on the mobile. And I argued without my face or seeing the face of anyone. So the emphasis, and that's when I said also, see, this is a package, as I said in your court craft. The forum changes. Only the weighing and the weightage to be adopted, to be put to different arts, that changes. Your facial expression need not be there once you are not on the video. But then your voice modulation is still there. You must know what to say at the first stage and then how to build your arguments. Obviously, you were hearing the other sides. The judge was hearing you. And then this is where my investments were being reaped. So what I had invested all these years, I could then use it. That don't see my face, just look at my merits. In VC hearings also, you would find, yes, as they say, dress and address are important. Addressing is your way of speaking, your dress, you're not shabby. We don't want to be, you people are more advanced on social media and technology. You must have seen so many articles coming and there's those snippets coming. Somebody sitting in his vest for the VC hearing. Obviously, it's not going to be countenanced. For a Supreme Court hearing, you are sitting on your bed. See, these are a big no. So you've got to weigh what is available. Yeah, nobody is seeing whether you are wearing a black trouser or a jeans or a shorts. But definitely if you are wearing your white shirt and a black coat, it gives a semblance of your being sincere to the profession. It gives a semblance of your being a serious counsel, that he is properly dressed. He's not shabby. If he's not shabby, I'm sure most of you would have seen it in school. Our PT teachers used to see our shoes, whether they are polished or not. Because as they used to say, a gentleman is known by the shoes, the way he keeps his shoes. So if they are polished, that means to the last bit you take care. So in the screen, if you are coming out neat, clean, and well-dressed, it gives a good impression. So for VC hearing also, please discount those elements which may not come in handy, but then definitely the way you address and your content of your argument, even your decency, I would simply say, interrupting too much and unmuting yourself constantly and then coming out, disturbing the court, it's a big problem. And therefore the judges sometimes get irritated. And I believe a very, very senior counsel was reprimanded by the division bench yesterday for unmuting himself several times. And it came out that the judge had to tell her court master, the division bench, the court had to tell the court master, mute him. So whether it is virtual or physical, behavior, only what you do is different, but the behavior result is the same. If it is annoying It can be annoying on VC. If it is annoying, it can be annoying in physical. So your smiling face will always give you one brownie point. I hope that answers.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful explanation, sir. And just moving on quickly to the next question, you were mentioning about your senior sense of humor, late Sri Ramaswamy sense of humor. Just adding one point from that, I'm just asking you, sir, how good sense of humor comes to the rescue in open court? You were telling about that, but what is the limit and where does one need to stop? Is there any fine line between considering having a good sense of humor or considering you as a bunch of jokers?
The fine line is here. It's again a craft. You must be able to use your wits. You don't have to. It's not a comedy show. See, ultimately, in the seriousness of the whole scenario, you should know where to put your wits. You can in a repartee or at the end of the hearing also you can just crack a joke or something. Sometimes that lightens the mood when you're just parting and you might just crack a joke. So that also lightens the mood, and when you come next time, again, it helps. But it doesn't mean that you start with opening line with just like a stand-up comedian. That's not what it is. You are a serious professional. This is only incidental, not vice versa.
Yes, sir. We should be careful of how we use our trump cards. Say, for example, good sense of humor. Sir, moving on to the next question. Are court crafts personality oriented or process oriented, sir? What is your view on that?
Personally speaking, it's a blend of both. Some people are they're naturally gifted with the gift of gab, and they are able to carry with them the court. Not just the court, the audiences. And this is true with any place or any profession where your oral and oratory skills have a meaning or have an impact. So public speaking is an art. It's science to the effect that you must factor in everything and then do it. You must be aware of the surrounding. It is process driven to the extent that since you are doing it in the closed quarters, in a hearing, during a process, you have to do it. It's not like I enter, open the door. It's not like drawing the curtains and I start the arguments. No, you're not on a stage in that sense of the matter. So it's not like some great artist performing on the stage. So the process is there, but personalities definitely change the way you actually drive. So it's a blend of both. It's neither simply personality driven nor simply exclusively process driven.
Yes, sir. We should have a combination of both.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, what is in your opinion when we think that we just try to emulate our seniors and take inspiration from them and keep following their footsteps? But don't you think at one stage we become their own replica instead of us becoming our own individual? The process of training which we undergo makes us a replica of a senior, or is it our individuality which should shine? What do you think, sir?
See, I have always maintained, and not just amongst lawyers, but even on the social side, family side also I maintain. You can be the best when you are yourself. And you can emulate people, but never imitate them. Because imitation has its limits. Emulating actually involves imbibing it in your own system. So it's like taking that COVID resistant plasma into your system, but running it in your own body and then recovering. You don't recover automatically simply with the injection of the plasma or infusion of the plasma. So you can be best you, and there cannot be another you. Keep that in mind. You are unique. So hone your talent. Don't superimpose something on yourself. Your language, your mannerisms, your face is yours exclusively. So you have to build yourself. Yes, many of times we do develop those borrowed traits, but that is because they become a part of you. They start reflecting, whether it is genetics, one would say he's doing the same thing like his father did or his grandfather did, but that's because it has come in you, in your blood. You can have your blood either from what you inherited or what from you eat every day, and the quality of your blood is by what you consume. So here you are consuming something nice, or you may consume arrogance, and then that may also go against you. Because you hail from a particular chamber, you sometimes develop that habit of antagonizing everyone. So it's both ways. It cuts both ways. It's what you teach. Nobody is born Indian or Chinese or American or French, or wherever you are born and whatever language you are taught, you learn it and you suddenly become that. So we learn from whatever we are taught, but best is to be you.
Yes, sir. The biggest takeaway is be yourself.
Yep.
Yes. Sir, moving on quickly to the next question. Sir, in your opinion, do you feel judges play an important role in influencing a junior lawyer's career or morale? In the sense, by giving them more opportunity or the much needed impetus of giving them the chance, a second chance in the courtroom, sir?
Can I answer this with my personal anecdotes of two very, very good judges whom I hold very close to my heart? First was Chief Justice of India, Justice Venkatachalaiah. I have quoted it very often, and I have even in one of my interviews given that example. I was a 1.5 year in the profession, and my first ever chance where my senior did not reach and my knees were shaking and probably on the verge of collapsing, when the Chief Justice of India says, "No second Passover, young man, start." And with every paragraph of my argument, every pause in my argument, I would turn around to see the door opening and my savior, my senior, returning. But unfortunately, it did not happen. But such kindness was there in that judge. He did not stop me for good 35 minutes when I had exhausted myself and on the verge of repeating the arguments the third time, that he said, "Is there anything else?" And I had choked. Then he said, it was a rent matter. I was for the tenant. I was to vacate. He looked at Mr. Parasaran was on the other side. He looked at Mr. Parasaran for the landlord. He said, "Mr. Parasaran, this young man has fought very well. How much time should we give him to vacate the premises?" And such was the kindness of the other gentleman, Mr. Parasaran, that he stood up and said, "Since my lords have allowed this young man to argue uninterrupted for such a long time in a matter which should have taken 2 minutes if his senior had come. I will leave it to you to give him time. And the judge said, all right, you vacate in 1 year. How many times do you hear that? And when that was the time when he was dismissing, that my senior rushed in. And he said, Mr. Ramaswamy, if you had come in, the petition would have been dismissed about 40 minutes back. So look at the morale that gets boosted. And I remember it, it's now what, good 27, 28 years that this happened. And I still remember it. It's embedded in my heart. And the other gentleman was Justice Dalveer Bhandari, who's now the judge of International Court of Justice. He simply said in a criminal appeal, he said, all right, young man, start arguing. I argued 1 point, 2 point, 3 points. Could not go on further. Then he said, what do you want? I didn't know what to say, so I said, my lords, I don't want a dismissal. I want an acquittal. He said, but that's not possible. So then I said, my lords may then think about giving me a reduced sentence. I don't want to go back to jail. It's been 7 years. He said, that's a good ground. But do you have a judgment with you? I said, yes. I handed over that judgment to him. He said, that's a very good ground. All right, take down. And he dismissed the appeal with sentence already undergone. Imagine in a 304 case, I had already gone into custody only for 3 months and he reduced the sentence to 3 months. And thereafter, he said, now you are going to come into my court every day at 2 o'clock. Before 2 o'clock, 15 minutes before, come pick up a file of the old cases where no counsel is appearing. I will appoint you amicus every day in one case and you argue that matter. And keep this judgment. If you fail, take already undergone. So I used to have one photocopy of that judgment every day with me. Argue the matter. If I succeed, all right. If I don't succeed, I would hand over that judgment copy and he would say, take down. So this is how these judges, and I was the secretary when he was appointed the Judge International Court of Justice. I said it on the podium that these are the kind of judges we need to boost the morale of the youngsters. And it has shaped me and I still owe it to them. And I'm not once, but at least 100 times I've repeated these two stories. And I'll continue to do so because they make a mark in one's life.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your life experience. The first important matter which you handled, it was quite inspiring. And sir, quickly moving on to the next one. Sir, I cannot resist from asking this question to you. Does Bar Association have any part in shaping a junior advocate's career?
It actually depends on the junior, frankly. Associations are generally there to help you build your profession, help you in building your profession, and then to help you in whatever you have already built to keep it intact. Bar associations generally are not supposed to work contrary to the interest of the lawyer or member. So the junior counsels, their careers can be shaped by bar associations when they are helped in getting the opportunities to address the courts, to appear as amicus, to this is one big problem that people think being appointed amicus same as being appointed as these LCs, because that's where you make some money as going as an LC. But that's not what your craft is. Your craft to be honed is your art of advocacy in court. So you must seek from your bar associations opportunities to get your arguments, to get you cases where you can build arguments before the court and expose your talent. So bar associations definitely are meant to help the youngsters stand on their own 2 feet. And I, for one, am a subscriber to it. And as the president of the bar, High Court Bar Association, I can say it in all platforms. We are there. If anyone needs any kind of help from us, we are there. Don't hesitate, because it's your bar. Tomorrow you will be in my position. And unless and until you have enjoyed the benefits of the bar association, you will never be able to give it to the younger members of your time in the future. So keep that in mind. I'm always there.
Thank you, sir. One thing I can say from the bottom of my heart, since DHCBA is my home bar, I can say the present EC is the best one we have seen, and it is one of the easily approachable, and the association which always comes to our rescue whenever there is a problem for the members. So this is from on my personal behalf. I thank you for the wonderful work which you are carrying, sir, under your leadership.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Sir, last question coming up for the day before we wrap our program. Sir, can you please share your secret of success with our participants?
See, I don't know. It's a very relative term. What is success? I feel slightly otherwise. I feel if you are happy and content, you are successful. I, for one, have always been happy in whatever state I was. I was fortunate. I am a 3rd generation counsel, so obviously there are certain benefits which I had. I had a good platform to stand on. I had a very, very good friend circle which always encouraged me. That's one advantage I've always had. It never let me go into any kind of a depression or any kind of a low whenever I was not doing so successfully, because success many a times at that stage of career, in the initial stages, is by success in the cases, not in the, because nobody sees the future, nobody's seen the future, so you don't know what's going to happen. So you are losing one case after the other, you're obviously low. I had a damn good friend circle, which I still carry on with me. And frankly, if you just visit my chamber once, you will find we don't talk law, we don't talk shop. So we are always gossiping about every damn thing under the sun. That keeps us peppy, always thinking of other things. So it keeps our minds fresh, and perhaps don't carry your professional problems home. That will keep your home also happy. So if I can say, these are the 3 things which I have tried to maintain. And I really, frankly, personally don't much bother if there are a little ups and downs, because life is long and you must cherish it every day. Enjoy. God knows when your day is. Keep always in mind, your day is being assigned by the divine. It may be today, it may be tomorrow. If it is not today, then wait for that tomorrow. Don't lose heart. This profession gives ample opportunities. Or baki kabhi, if you want to just have some resting time amongst lawyers, not discussing law, we are always open.
Thank you very much, sir. It was wonderfully summed up. If it is not your day, it is just a bend, not an end. Thank you, sir. We hope we will continue for another 1 hour also. We are really engrossed by the way you have taken this presentation today. But due to the want of time, I take this opportunity to thank you wholeheartedly for coming up on our platform and presenting a wonderful insight on court crafts, sir. It is not only for all the participants who have come up today, but it will go on air, it will go on YouTube. It will benefit larger audience, larger section of people who may be coming to join our fraternity tomorrow or the day after. This will be forever, sir. Thank you very much, and we are really honored, sir.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are thank you, participants. We are having other exciting webinars also coming up. We have a webinar tomorrow. Already we have released the posters. Kindly check our Facebook page for more details. With this, we wrap our today's presentation. It is Anand signing off. Thank you all. Meet you all tomorrow. Happy weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.